the theme that I was using this morning or yesterday, 12 hours ago. So what I was wanting us to consider is the language around Nirodha, the third noble truth, which is usually phrased the cessation of craving. And Nirod is synonymous with liberation, synonymous with Nibbana sometimes. And so you have a language like the abandonment of craving, the relinquishment of craving, letting go, and so on, which doesn't have much positive impact. But if one were to consider Nirodha as a Vipon, if you would mute yourself.
I'm trying to, sir.
Okay, there you go. So Vibhun has been niroded, muted. So the word nirodha can sound like you've been muted, that kind of idea. But there's also a more positive way to look at that. So if we maybe thought about nirodha like would be non-desire, what would non-desire look like? And then you have some interesting possibilities. And one of the words I'd like to play around with this retreat is the word trust. And coming very much from the way Luangpor Sumedho has been teaching of like trust and awareness. And so when you have a word like that, you can bring it into the mind and see what does that word reflect for you? What does it do to you? What are your attitudes in relationship to that word? And that's one way of brightening the mind. Like if you're meditating and you're very sleepy, you're basically bored with what's going on, or you're just exhausted, then you just need to sleep. But to develop interest in the meditation is important. And one of the ways you can do that is by exploring. And one of the ways to explore is not just intellectually, because intellectual exploration is that something you do with books. But in meditation, you want the exploration to be experiential, existential, and in a way somehow serves your understanding of the mind and leads to composure, leads to peace, leads to an end to suffering. So the word, so in terms of what non-desire might be, if you bring into mind like just trust. So I'll try to use that word in the guided meditation, but also more obviously, generosity is non-desire, right? So when the heart has generosity, it's somehow experiencing non-desire. It's in let's say it's in the neighborhood of Nirodha. We could say something like that, right? And that's very helpful. Otherwise, you always think I have to let go of my desires. My desires are horrible, and so on and so forth. But there's also this way of uplifting the mind in very wholesome ways, which we do all the time. And we need to remember the wholesomeness of that and do that. Gratitude, forgiveness. Forgiveness is not desire. That's the same territory, isn't it? Forgiveness, yeah. Compassion. Appreciative joy, and you can name your own words, and so you want to incline your practice not just to letting go of craving, which is very, very important, but also kind of moving your whole consciousness into the territories of non-desire, into the neighborhood of things like compassion, which we all do, and we all aspire to that. And then to taste those moments, that's moments of non-desire, when you're not trying to do or trying to get rid of something. We're all problem solvers. So we do throughout the day. So we have some Thai friends who run a restaurant in Kingston, and the price of oil, cooking oil, is now more than double what it was pre-COVID. and so on and so forth. So the cost of goods is very expensive. And so some of the restaurateurs were visiting us and saying they have to redo the menus, they have to charge more. I said, and they don't want to give less food because people don't like that. So they have a business problem. How can they re-enter into the COVID time? And then the owner's thinking, well, maybe I'll just keep it as a takeaway. So she's solving a problem, business problem. I'm solving a problem with some furniture. I'm trying to figure out how to put some pieces of wood together to make a bench or whatever. You might be solving a problem in home economics. You know, how do you prepare a meal for 20 people, or you might be whatever. So throughout the day, we tend to be putting a lot of effort into getting a solution, finding a solution to a problem. So if that's the momentum of our minds, then that is going to enter into the way we meditate. We're going to try to find a solution. And the problem with that is that you can very much go into meditation and not really be aware of that very attitude of trying to get some solution. And if you're not aware of that, then you're not aware. And so the attention is driven by the habit of 8 hours of work in a problem-solving environment. And then that momentum takes you into your meditation, and then you're trying to get something or do something. But a lot of meditation is just waiting. And waiting is very, very difficult because it doesn't seem very productive. A lot of meditation is waiting for nothing. That's even worse. And why is that important? Well, because the restlessness of the mind and the habits of thought have a certain momentum, because I've been planning and organizing through the day, dealing with people and dealing with problems. A certain amount, that the echoes of that, say, the echoes of all that interactivity, obviously is going to come up into my mind. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's natural. And it's right there where we have to trust in awareness. And it's right there that we don't tend to trust in awareness. We want to do something to solve this problem of thought. I want to get rid of the thinking. Shut up, be quiet, not now. I don't need that now. I want peace. And that won't work. That'll just make you more and more frustrated. We need to bring attention to thought as an object. You know, we need to have some kind of strategy not to engage in thought. Yeah. But that's not so much a problem to solve as a practice to do. The person who thinks they have to solve the problem is usually trying to get rid of thought. The person who awakens to thought as an object and sees that thought is an object that comes because of the results of today's activities or yesterday's activities, sees it with patience, bears it with patience, the thinking mind begins to have less power, and the gaps between thought are known. As the gaps between thought are known, that becomes an inclination of non-desire. You see, between thoughts, there's non-desire, there's silence, there's emptiness. It's very hard to see. So when a suggestion then in meditation is to trust in awareness, what you can do is you can establish awareness very simply by listening to sound or feeling your breath, or whatever you like. You can do some metta bhavana, which is very, very good to establish an awareness which is receptive rather than controlling or looking for something. So that's very, very helpful. So introducing metta into the beginning of each practice is tremendously important, I would say, more than helpful, important. I think that would, to put it more strongly, so that the attitude of the awake mind is one of allowing and being receptive and open. So then you have established, and then you put the word trust in awareness. Then you get kidnapped by thinking, huh? And you find yourself thinking about that work situation, and that's natural. And then that's where you have to trust in awareness. And that's where quite often we don't trust in awareness. What we trust in is the thinking mind. And we feel that we have to get rid of thought, or we go back into that planning again. It goes on and on. So the moment you notice that you have been thinking work-related things in your meditation, the moment you notice that is the moment of awakening. That's the moment of what Luangpor is talking about. Trust in that moment. And this requires a Dhammavijaya. This requires a kind of inquiry into that moment. And this makes your mind very bright, because if you can inquire into that moment of awakening to thought as an object. So before that, you are the subject. You're thinking, you're planning, you're arguing, or whatever in your own head. And there's a story, and then there's the honking of a horn of a car outside, makes some noise, and then you're startled into present moment. Or maybe your knee hurts, and you're startled into the present moment. That's the moment of awakening. And you want your meditation, no matter what you're doing, whether you're doing anapanasati or metta bhavana or subhagamatana, whatever you're doing, you want that moment to be very, very important and honored, and say, oh, this is it, I'm here. Rather than in that moment saying, oh, I'm thinking too much, I have to stop thinking, I have to do something, and become the problem solver. That won't work, because it'll just take you to more thinking, because it's desire. It's the desire not to think. Where trust is non-desire. Trust is non-desire. So we still have the desire to understand the mind. Certainly, there's that background intention. Otherwise, we wouldn't meditate. Certainly, but in that moment of awakening, if you put tanha in there, or craving to get rid of thought, that'll make you think more. If you don't do anything, you probably won't even notice you're thinking, and the bell will ring. So, but what are you doing? You're making bright and conscious that moment of awakening. And you say, that's it. That's the moment. Nothing else to do. Sustain, wait, know that moment. And then if you are using a word like trust, then you can bring that up. Just trust this. It's here now. And then in that word trust, you'll see if you're not trusting. You'll see if there's like you're trying to do something, get rid of something, or you're judging yourself, or you're analyzing whatever it's going on. You'll say, oh, that's the extra activity. That's the papancha, the prungdang that is going on around that moment of awakening, that very special moment of awakening. Now, as you get more attentive to that moment, you'll see that gap between thoughts is the gap of nirodha. It's where the sense of self ceases, the sense of I ceases, and it's where you enter into the timelessness of the amata dhamma, the unconditioned. And so those gaps, once they present themselves to you or you notice them, then they don't seem like much. A big deal. And then you want a big deal. You don't just want the ordinary, the ho-hum. You want some experience, and that's tanha again. So you bring up the word, just trust in this. So sometimes you just and you'll be very peaceful, but peace is very boring. You think it's very peaceful. Now what should I do? And that's tanha, that's craving. So if you keep putting in the word trust each time you awaken, just trust. You're moving, you're living in the territory of non-desire, in the territory of cessation of desire. Then when you have that established, then you can do things. You can do metta bhavana, right? You can recollect the Buddha, but your activity now is coming from non-desire rather than from the desire to get rid of thought. So that's the most important step, is that entering into the present moment and knowing the present moment without desire. Then sure, then pick up metta bhavana and experiment. How does metta bhavana work? Or pick up the breath, or do choiceless awareness, whatever you want. But what you're coming from is non-desire, right? Rather than the desire to get something or get rid of something, which is bhava and vibhava tanha. That won't work. So introducing trust and non-desire first and foremost. Then sometimes you don't have to do anything. You don't want to do anything because you get tired of that. Sometimes you just feel you're a bit too lost. You want to ground yourself, compose the mind around some object. But the most important thing is to not be coming from desire, to be coming from non-desire. It's like this, the way Luangpor keeps teaching us, trust and awareness. All right? So that's the kind of instruction I'll offer. Let's do some meditation then. I'll set the clock for 45 minutes. I'll walk through the Metta Bhavana as a beginner and so on and so forth. And then I'll be quiet. We'll sit quietly for the rest of the 45 minutes. And then I'll wrap up with some other ideas or similar ideas. So take a posture that you can hold fairly comfortably. Awakening to the way things are. Notice that awakening isn't something you get, but it's something you remember, you notice, you realize. So life is like this. There's the temperature in the room, temperature of your body. The sounds. The mood of the mind. And trust in this awareness, trust in knowing. To heighten awareness, choose a sense door, listen to sound. Let the sound come to you. Notice you're not trying to find a particular sound. You're not looking for something. You are aware of what is. So there isn't a tension of searching for an answer. Change the sense object. Choose the body. Notice the feelings in your hands. Let the feelings in your hands become conscious. Non-desire. Just the way things are. Listen to sound again. Perceive sound as in awareness. Awareness is spacious. Bodily feeling hands. Perceive the feelings of the hands as in awareness. So both sound, bodily feeling arise and cease and change in awareness. So trust that. And then bring up the word trust. What does that do for the attitude you bring to this? Let's do some Metta Bhavana to open the heart and establish awareness as a welcoming attitude. Bring attention to the center of your chest. Feel the breathing at the center of the chest. Now don't concentrate, but rather make conscious the feelings at the center of the chest. So it's not like a hard focus on this. Chest is rising and falling with the breath, and you are trusting in awareness of this. Make the in-breath welcoming, out-breath letting go. On the in-breath, name, visualize, imagine someone you love or someone for whom you have affection. And then allow that memory to touch your heart. So feel it at the heart. So you might imagine a grandchild. Now, don't think about the person, rather let their image trigger the memory of open-heartedness. So on the in-breath, I use Luangpor. I use many people, but say if I use Luangpor Sumedo, on the in-breath, Luangpor, and then the out-breath, may you be well. So we're remembering what affection is, loving kindness, and we're stimulating that. Now just trust in this practice. It's not, you're not trying to manufacture something special. It is what it is. So you're trusting that intention, Luangpor, may you be well. And then bring up another person, same sense of affection. On the in-breath, the name or the visual image, out-breath, may you be well. Now use the breathing and the name of the person as a calming composure exercise. So you're calming the mind, composing the mind in the present moment with this open-hearted attitude. And then if you want a third person, now let go of the thinking and just notice the awareness which is open, receptive, and just trust in that open receptivity. So you're not trying to get something or get rid of something. Now finally turn to the breathing of the body. Feel an in-breath, trusting in awareness. So the important thing is not the breath, it's this attitude of awake, open, knowing. So one in-breath, awake, open, knowing. One out-breath, the same. just trusting in this simple process. And then the challenge will be thought. Remember, when thought gets interrupted by sound or pain or whatever, and you notice, then awaken. Oh, I'm here now. Feels like this. Trust in that. And then from that trust, pick up the breath or whatever you like to do. So you establish non-desire first. Okay, it's a whole bunch of ideas. I'll leave those for you, and we'll just sit quietly. So if you allow me just a few more ideas before we close this meeting. So trusting in awareness, a good example of this would be towards the end of your meditation. Say you're used to sitting for 40 minutes or half an hour, and then I set the clock for 45 minutes. And then because you're sort of used to sitting a certain amount of time, perhaps as the time stretches into after the half hour or whatever, then what easily arises is, when is this sitting going to end? That's a common thing, right? So that's a perception that arises in the mind, and it arises because you probably, maybe you feel some pain, or it's boring, or some discomfort. So desire arises with that. And with desire, it creates time. When is this going to end? And with time, there's a sense of self. How long are we going to sit? So the sense of self and time are very much conjoined. Now, if you are practicing trusting in awareness, then you'll see that that sense of self is an object in awareness. It has reality in the sense that it arose, but it's not a permanent thing. It's something that arose because of causes and conditions. And if you see that, and you know that, and you trust in awareness, then that restlessness, which wants to look at the clock, which wants to leave, which wants to do something interesting, that kind of restlessness is known as an object. Because it's known as an object, you don't become the subject, you don't act on it. You're practicing non-desire with the knowing of desire. You're knowing desire as it is, as an object, you're not lost in it. And because you're doing that, then, and you're not fueling that desire by doing anything, you're just noticing it, then even though the mind feels a bit restless, you're laying the foundations for peace. Because you're not reacting to it, you're knowing, because you're taking refuge in awareness, because you're trusting in awareness. And so you all remember the adage that Luangpor would give us a lot. If your meditation makes you peaceful, then accept it. If your meditation doesn't make you peaceful, then accept it. And that's very profound, actually. Or another one in a similar vein: if you want to meditate, meditate. If you don't want to meditate, meditate, right? And you can see what that's pointing to, because in those last, maybe 10, 15 minutes, maybe you don't want to meditate. You want to get up and answer some emails, or have some tea, or whatever you want, and that's not immoral. But because you don't want to meditate, that's not the reason to not meditate. So that's why we set boundaries of time. These are very good. A boundary of like 45 minutes here. And then in that boundary, you give up to that boundary, you surrender to that boundary, rather than just surrendering to desire when you want to go. If it's safe, if you're hurting yourself, then you leave. It's not extreme in that way. And it becomes very, very interesting. It's an exercise in noticing what happens to me in 45 minutes of meditation. I'll trust in awareness. There's not even demanding that you're peaceful, or that you get insight, or that your heart's very open. There's no demand that way, simply trusting in awareness. And lots of times you have to sit through unpleasant material, some argument you had at work, or some memories coming up for something else, some other reason, and it's not pleasant, but it is still an object. And if you trust in awareness, then the tension of that and the self-identity with that falls away. And all the time, what we're doing is practicing something which is timeless. So the awakened mind is timeless in the sense that you're not constructing something in order to get the aware mind later on, right? You're awakening constantly. So that's timeless in that sense. You could say it's in time, and sometimes you get forgetful, but it's not something like accumulated or built up or constructed. It's not sankata, it's not sankhara in that sense. So and this is the paradox, by knowing the sense of time as a feeling, I want this meditation to end, you're practicing the timelessness, which is akalika dhamma. When we when we chant, when you just finished the chanting, this morning chanting, you had Akalika Dhamma, you were chanting that timeless Dhamma. And what is the timeless Dhamma? It's knowing that life is like this now and trusting in that. And that's why it opens to Nibbana, to the unconditioned, to the uncreated. Because anything that's created is born and dies in time. And this isn't the same. It's not the same. It's a different dimension, let us say. Huh? So the more we can enter these territories of non-desire and abide with them, we're inclining towards the unconditioned, the Amaravati, the deathless realm, Akalika Dhamma. We have this kind of language. So it's like you might not think the 10 minutes at the end of the meditation is important, or you might think it was a bad meditation, but don't believe that perception. To sit through a sitting where you want to leave is actually very good practice. And just noticing the feeling of wanting to leave is a very good practice. If you get caught in the judgment of meditation, that your meditation will always be peaceful, you'll be deeply absorbed into silence, or that the metta bhavana will radiate in all directions all the time, you're going to be in trouble, because meditation doesn't work that way. It's much more about whatever arises. Abiding is the timeless knowing. So if you want to meditate, meditate. If you don't want to meditate, meditate. If meditation makes you peaceful, then accept it. If your meditation doesn't make you peaceful, or accept it. That's a very profound, I find, very profound advice, and it keeps coming up. So there's that. For those of you who are in Southeast Asia or South Asia, or whatever, or Perth, this is morning time. So may I just talk a little bit about waking up in the morning from sleep? This is if you want to develop a time of day where you're going to consistently meditate, I would say the morning is very profitable. Evening time, you can be quite ragged, and it's maybe pretty hard. You just want to do some zombie work with the television, which is fine too. But the morning it has a kind of freshness to the mind and to the day. So if you can get up earlier than the family gets up, maybe earlier than the birds get up, and develop a practice there, you'll find that very profitable, because it will imbue your mind and consciousness with Dharma and all the good intentions that you want to make. So morning practice is very, very important and very helpful. In terms of sleeping, many people find it hard to get a good night's sleep. They might wake up at 3 and they want to wake up at 6 or something like that, or 5. Then you might just, rather than bouncing around in the bed feeling negative, I would recommend, and those of you who have practiced with me know, I recommend Yoga Nidra, which is lying down meditation. So just, I'll just repeat that for those of you who heard this a million times, so bear with me. So Yoga Nidra is the development of the lying down posture. And that seems very difficult because it seems a bit too easy maybe, and people fall asleep. But give it a go, especially if you've got, arthritic problems, or in the middle of the night, you don't want to get up and meditate, but you can't fall asleep. It's a very good posture to develop, even if you're not ill. But if you're ill, it's very kind of necessary. So Yoga Nidra is the way I practice it, you lay your body out in Sarvasana, in the corpse posture, and then you put a bolster or a pillow or under your knees. So you get your knees up quite a bit, and that relieves pressure on the small of the back. Some people even do this with their feet flat, lying down with their feet flat and their knees in the air. But if you get like a couple of pillows under your knees, you'll find that really, really works for the small of the back. So you can hold the posture for a long, long time. And then do it on your mattress or whatever soft surface you have. I wouldn't suggest a yoga mat. That's too hard, because this posture you can keep going for an hour or two. The body kind of really likes laying down. And then with your head, make sure that your pillow is set up so that your head isn't like that, because that'll crink your neck. So you are setting up a good posture in the lying. It's not just kind of laying any old way. So Sarvasana, something under the knees, head supported properly. And then come to full body awareness and use that idea that I use, that sound is an awareness, bodily feeling is an awareness. So get the sense of what awareness is, establish awareness, and the body is in awareness. Then from that, readjust your posture 10% to make it comfortable, right? Having readjusted it, then the secret is don't move from then on, right? And that's the most important instruction. Don't move. Not in a kind of rigid way, but don't move. So what'll happen within 30 seconds, you'll want to move. You'll have an itch, or what usually you want to do is roll over on your side, which is okay if you want to go to sleep, fine. But if you want to meditate, you don't want to do that, because that's the posture that you associate with sleep. So you stay on the back, and you notice the desire to move as your object of awareness. And because you notice the desire to move and you don't move, you're calming the mind down, because that's the restlessness of the body and mind, wanting to move. You want to scratch, you'll think, oh, I could just shift my shoulder a bit, or I could shift my hands a bit. Don't move. That's why you do the 10% one first. Give your restless mind 10% more. All right, that's the deal. Now you can't move. I'm sorry. And if you just notice that, and with body awareness, then you can sustain this practice for a long, long time. And it's incredibly valuable. Like, let's say you do get up at, your normal getting up time, say 6, and then you find that like at 4 o'clock, you're tossing and turning and tossing and turning. You have very negative states of mind then usually, because you're not getting what you want. What you want is sleep, and you can't fall asleep. So you're tossing and turning, and you might get a bit grumpy or whatever. But then in that moment, you say, why don't I try Yoga Nidra? You don't have to do anything really. You can go to the washroom and brush your teeth if you want, but come back and lay out in Sarvasana and try this out. And then if you find it helpful, then try to alternate sitting and lying and walking. That's very good to do, especially if you find like a cross-legged posture and that difficult. Having a really, really still posture where there's no effort needed. You have to have the effort of the brightness of mind, but there's no effort to hold up the body. It's very interesting, very interesting. So some people like it, many don't, because they fall asleep, but I think it's worth an experiment. And don't always do it when you're tired. Do it when you're bright, like rather than sitting. Try lying down when you've got lots of energy. See what that posture might be like. I find it very, very interesting. When you wake up in the morning, then so that's that meditation. You can alternate, do it whenever you want. It's hard to do a retreat with lying meditation because, well, it takes up more floor space. And if people snort, it's not pretty. So we don't usually do it as a group. So if people try to do it in the meditation, I say, no, don't do it. Do it in your room. That's more appropriate, because usually in a meditation hall, it wouldn't be appropriate kind of posture. Just the way we are. But so having said that, when you do wake up in the morning, what is the mood of the mind? Is that part of your practice? Do you notice what your thinking mind is saying? What is the mood of the mind? It seems to me that's terribly important, because whatever the mood of your mind is when you wake up, that's the mood that you're going to take to brush your teeth. And if it's a negative mood of mind, or a worrying mood of mind, or whatever it is, and you're not knowing, oh, this is negative, this is worry, this is anxiety, this is aversion, this is resentment, then you're brushing your teeth with that resentment, and breakfast you're having. So that mood becomes, to some extent, the way you enter into the day, which is unpleasant and unskillful. But if you right from the get-go, when you notice, when your alarm goes, or whatever, you notice the sound of the birds, then go to the heart and go to the feeling, may all beings be well. Bring that up strong. Just get really, really good at that, because that will serve you incredibly well. May I be free from suffering. May all beings be free from suffering. Whatever mantra you like. And go to the heart chakra. Because quite often in deep sleep, when you come out of deep sleep, the heart chakra has been, how shall we say, it's been noticed. Or it's been a lot enlivened, or I'm not quite sure of the language, but you really feel it. You can really feel it from deep sleep sometimes. Sometimes not, but you're not looking for anything special. But then, because deep sleep itself is a deep state of non-desire, and awareness can function from there if you notice that, and so you want to get familiar with that. So as you're falling asleep, establish awakeness, oddly enough, awareness of the way things are, and see how strong that awareness can be when you wake up. If you make those intentions, then awareness gets more and more strong right from the get-go. And if it's negative, you can say, oh, it's like this, and you're not reborn into a negative, grumpy state. Or if the heart's very, very open, you can work on that or expand that or make that strong. Or if you're doing yoga nidra, then bring up a picture of your teacher, a picture of your grandchild, and go right to the heart chakra. So you should, right from the start, you're imbuing consciousness with love. And that's so, I mean, it's just refreshing in itself. But also, I think if sati is going to be authentic, it needs that component, because that component is so very important in the practices of right mindfulness. At least that's my perception of it. All right, I think that's sufficient. So I'll end it here, and we'll see you in roughly 12 hours. Okay.